Hello and welcome to the Moonshots Podcast. It's episode 41. I'm your co-host, Mike Parsons, and as always, I'm joined by the man from Brooklyn. Yes, Mr. Chad Owen. Good morning, Brooklyn.
Good evening, Sydney.
And boy, Chad Owen, I thought I was busy, but it sounds like you have been traversing the United States of America, here, there, and everywhere. What's been going on?
Oh, just visiting all of my clients on the West Coast. I'm fortunate enough to work with some really great companies out there. But I hear you're going on a European tour here too.
Yes, the fun never stops. We got things cooking away here in Sydney. Thankfully, the rugby season is over, so I'm just like immersed in work at the moment. I got a big Bucharest, Amsterdam tour coming up. Going to see the Qualitons team. We're going to see the Gradient team. It's going to be so much fun. Lots of talks, lots of innovation masterclasses. It's pretty action-packed. I've been working the keynote, Chad, all week, just getting everything ready. And I think you have got a drop on our audience, a very special show we've got coming up. I am super pumped for this one.
Yeah, so probably one of the things that you do on all of your various travels is lug some books around. That's partly, some of the inspiration for this authors series. But I actually discovered this person via some YouTube clips of some talks that he had given. And so if you haven't checked out Simon Sinek and some of the TED Talks and 99U talks that he has given, that is who we are going to be unpacking and breaking down and learning from on today's show.
Yeah, and do you remember when you first came across that really famous talk he gave on the power of why and how he applied it to Apple? Do you remember seeing that one for the first time?
Yeah, and the budding marketer in me really, really enjoyed that because I think, just the power of the question of why is so immense. And I think he was able to directly relate it to business in a way that I hadn't necessarily seen done before.
Yeah, I think we can't overstate the influence of his first major book, Start With Why, and how everyone in the marketing, communications, and consultancy world just was like reusing this framework because it's just so damn simple and so powerful. And we're going to get into that in this show. And this guy, Simon Sinek, is so prolific. We're very fortunate. We've got a ton of good clips of him speaking, and we're going to be able to unpack and decode what he's talking about, work out how we can apply it. And the other critical thing here that I really want to stress is, Chad, we're not only going to be delving into the world of the Start With Why book, but he also wrote an amazing book called Leaders Eat Last. And I found both books I'm going to have to say both books would be in my top 10 ever business books. I don't know how. What are you feeling? Did you get a chance to peruse Leaders Eat Last?
I did. Yeah, that's actually an interesting question. I would have to go back through and see all of the books I've read and try to rank them. I don't know that I have maybe quite formulated a ranking of my books yet, but so that might be an interesting exercise this winter.
Definitely. And obviously, we chose Simon Sinek because he's very different to Clay Christensen, who's very cerebral, probably a dash of the academic. Peter Drucker is just like, he defined management, if you will. Simon Sinek, I feel like what he does so particularly well, why he really matters, is he's really tuned into the behaviors that we have, not only at work and in life. And I find him one of the best storytellers we've ever studied on the show, don't you, Chad?
Yeah, he opens all of his talks with really gripping, amazing stories. Like, I actually don't ever really remember the names of the talks or even necessarily sometimes like the book or something that he's referencing, but the opening stories that he tells are super memorable. Like, I know like specifically the story he tells in front of the Leaders Eat Last presentations or keynotes that he gives is, around this A-10 Warthog Air Force plane that's in support of troops in Afghanistan. It's just, it's just the way as you're saying, the way he kind of relates it to our personal and human experience is a very nice contrast to the previous, authors that we've been doing in this series. And he's a bit of a provocateur too. Like, he's in this first clip that we have to kind of introduce him, he is not just taking things at face value, and he's kind of asking us to question a few things.
Yeah, absolutely. Why don't you just let it rip? This is Simon Sinek, and what we're going to hear from him is, his thoughts on what really is innovation.
How do you define innovation?
Well, I mean, a definition I like is the application of technology to solve human problems. I know that not all innovation is about technology. I know that. But I like that, if we have a very broad definition of innovation.
Why does that register so well with you?
Because the important part to me is the solving of human problems. Just because we can do something doesn't mean we should do something. And I think, especially in the technology world, we become obsessed with the fact that we can, not that we should. And we call innovation where it's really nonsense. I mean, for example, do you remember when, if you wanted to watch, if you needed a projector, you used to pull the string down to get the screen down? Like, what problem were they solving, getting rid of the string? Now everything has a button. And by the way, those buttons and those motors break all the time. I don't ever recall that string being a problem. And yet we feel the need, because we can put motors and buttons on things, that we should put a motor and button on that. It's like you look at a Toyota Prius and everything is touchscreen. So if you're following the GPS and the phone rings, you lose the GPS. Or if you want to change the temperature, or if you have to hit 4 screens to turn. What happened with knobs and buttons? Like, what's wrong with turning up the volume like this for your radio? Like, what human problem are we solving? The answer is we're not solving any human problems. That's the problem with that kind of technology. It's pointless. One of the best pieces of innovation I've seen lately is my toaster, which is, and I bought my toaster specifically for this feature, which is you push a toaster down to make it toast, and then it pops up. And my toaster, you can lift the button up, and it lifts the toast out, so you don't have to go picking it out with a fork or a knife. That's innovation. That's the application of some sort of technology, or engineering in this case, to solve a human problem. And I think just because we can do things, whether engineers or technologists or on the internet, doesn't mean that we necessarily should. And if you have the capacity to do something big, make sure you're solving a real problem that exists, not something that doesn't. I have more respect for my toaster than I do a Toyota Prius.
I love it.
Chad, I'm just now thinking, as he said that, I'm thinking about my toaster, and we literally have a wooden sort of chopstick construction to help pick the toast out, because my toaster doesn't do what his does. It's crazy, isn't it? It's like, I don't know how long toasters have been around, but why is it so hard to do that? And I'm forever burning the toast, even to this very day. It really does call into question, for what purpose are we innovating, doesn't it?
Yeah, I love this idea of nonsense innovation that he kind of calls out here. I would hope that everyone that we've profiled so far on the show doesn't really fit into that qualification, but I know that you and I could look around us and in our previous experiences and see a lot of nonsense innovation out there.
Yeah, and as you said, it really points to how he challenges us, makes us think twice, perhaps ask why. And I think that's really the power of what we have in store for us for the rest of the show. So one side note, please, everyone, if you want to follow the links to the books or get more information about Simon Sinek or any of the other authors that we've covered, head off to moonshots.io and you can get everything you need. Now, Chad, we've got a whole bunch of clips coming up here all around this kind of theme of life hacking and challenging how we think and feel and behave at work. Where do you want to start this delve into the world of Simon Sinek?
Yeah, well, and don't forget the second block where we really get into Simon on leadership, which I think is one of his strongest suits and where he has the most to say. But so his book, Start With Why kind of begins at the individual and kind of expands to the organization, and then his second book, Leaders Eat Last, really kind of takes it from the kind of organization and kind of company point of view. But so I think we can start with the core, the genesis of this why idea, and Simon really just kind of helping us figure out how to find fulfillment in the work that we're doing. Essentially, like, putting a stake in the ground and having a why.
There's a statistic that over 90% of people go home at the end of the day feeling unfulfilled by their work. This is the difference between liking your job and loving your job. You can like your job, but do you love your job? And over 90% of the people who work these days don't. And I imagine a world in which that statistic is completely reversed, in which the vast majority of people go home at the end of the day feeling fulfilled by the work that they do, feeling that they've contributed to something bigger than themselves. I've always been a pretty happy-go-lucky guy, but about 5 years ago, I reached a point in my career where my passion was gone. I stopped loving what I was doing, and I even got to the point where I didn't really like it anymore. And for a happy person, just being unhappy was bad enough. And it was this point in my life that I made this discovery, this thing called the why. And what I learned is that every single organization on the planet, even our own careers, function on 3 levels: what we do, how we do it, and why we do it. These are the things that we think make us different or special compared to everyone else. But very few of us can clearly articulate why we do what we do. And I don't mean to earn a living or provide for your family. Those are results. By why, I mean, what's your purpose, what's your cause, what's your belief? And after I learned my why, I literally stopped telling people what I did and only started telling them what I believed. And not only was my passion restored, but my career and my life changed dramatically and took on an entirely new path with vastly more meaning.
Such a powerful set of ideas, asking why, not just looking at what you do, but asking how do you do it and why. I can't tell you, Chad, how many times I've used this for myself, for the companies that I've worked in, for the clients I've worked for. I mean, this is right up there. This idea is right up there with the 4-Hour Workweek book from Tim Ferriss. This whole idea of starting with why is really profound for me because it really uncovers the real reasons that we get up in the morning and the real reasons we believe in ourselves and others. You must have, as a storyteller, just thought about this why framework so many times, Chad. I mean, how's it come alive in your life and your work?
Yeah, well, and I've seen you put it in action in real life, Mike, using the why framework. So I can tell you listeners that Mike's not just saying that he loves this. I've seen him do it, live in the room with people before. He's a true fan. It's interesting for me because I think as a storyteller, I've kind of intuited this wisdom, from Simon for a long time, but maybe hadn't articulated it like he does. And he has a very simple framework and even diagram or model where he draws 3 circles, and in the outermost circle he puts what you do, and then in the next circle he puts how you do it, and then in the core, the target that he's up there on the stage and he's just kind of like circling and he's marking up the middle of this, telling you that it's really the core that matters, and that's the why. And I kind of see it as my goal as the storyteller to really get to that why as quickly as possible and understand that. And then once you connect with someone, with their why, then it kind of unlocks everything else about them. It kind of unlocks the rest of their being. And then, you see them come alive and they become really activated and excited. And you can hear it in his voice when he's talking about, being completely disillusioned in what he was doing. So this is a bit of a challenge I'm going to give to you, Mike. You don't have to answer it now, but by the end of the episode, I would like to hear your why.
Okay, only if you agree to do the same.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm kind of cheating because I've actually been doing this work on myself a little bit, both in preparation for this episode, but also just for my own professional development as I'm building my business.
Oh, okay, I would also
challenge listeners too, that as you're listening to this episode and learning along with us from Simon, there's so much power in just writing it down, your why. Yeah, so that's just something that I wanted to challenge you on. this time around, Mike.
Love it. Love it. Well, this whole journey into using the why framework ain't easy, is it? And trying to get to the nub of why you do things and then behaving in accordance with that, that's probably, the biggest challenge. And what's so great about Simon Sinek is he's written a lot about not only the why framework, but about leadership, about passion, about how you, not only the end point, but how you get there. And this next clip is him really delving into the world of what it really takes to understand courage and what it looks like and feels like, because that's something you're going to call on when you're really trying to be true to why you do things. So let's have a listen now to Simon Sinek on helping us to understand courage.
Courage is an external thing, right? So I have met people who literally have courage, what we would call courage. They have put their lives on the line. They have thrown themselves into harm's way in order to save the life of someone else. They have done something that we would consider mad, that violates all tenets of survive, that we're supposed to do things to survive so that someone else will survive. Courage, real courage. And I've talked to them and I always say, why did you do it? You've got a wife, you've got kids. Why would you do that? And they all give me the same answer every time. Because they would have done it for me. Because someone else would have done the same for me. It is the absolute confidence that the person to the left and the person to the right will do the same for me that gives them the courage to do amazing things.
This clip is actually really resonating with me because of what's happening. Here we are, beginning of October 2018, and there's a real swell of support around the Me Too movement. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to dwell on it because I'm a straight white guy, but I think the fact that because so many other women are beginning to share and open up, and we are being receptive to it, that courage, I want to be clear, like that is very courageous on the parts of all of those women. They're able to do it just in the same way that Simon is talking about here.
And I love this idea because you can see it in the social dynamic, as you have pointed out. But you know what the crazy thing is? You think about teams in the office, when you know that someone's got your back because they'd step in to help you when you're in a bind. Or even if you go to the sports field, one of the key things to a defensive system working in any form of football is that each independent player believes in the other and has the knowledge that the other person would back them up. So that gives them this courage to push forward themselves. And it's so this underlying pattern, sort of almost how life works.
I think the disappointing thing is that probably most organizations don't function in a way where everyone has the confidence to know that others are looking out for them, above, that they're being selfless and not selfish, because I think it's the default to be very selfish.
Yeah. And without getting too meta here, in the end, the most selfish thing in the world to do is to be unselfish, because you get all the good karma that comes back by putting others first. Isn't that ironic?
I think also what he's getting at is like the incentives and the structures inside of, well, this is probably just within capitalism. It's just there's no incentives for the altruistic motives.
Yes,
if you follow him, if you follow Simon further in his readings and his admonitions to us, it's a bit of a rail against the capitalist system. And he's like, well, actually, strangely enough, like if you act in this selfless and courageous way, it actually, leads to higher performing teams and therefore, higher profit. So it's kind of this counterintuitive way to get at, get at that kind of success.
And look, in the end, good teams, regardless of the forum, good social dynamics, regardless of the forum, all require just that little bit of selflessness, where you just put others before you. And we've talked about humble leadership, servant leadership before. And I think he's kind of touching on this. And, you know, if you want to realize your why, I think having that sort of courage around you and the externalities of that amongst others and what you can do to make that happen is what we're learning here. But he hasn't stopped helping us with some tips on how to get the job done, how to be a great leader, how to pursue your why, how to have some positive impact on the world. And this next thought from Simon is all about the hard thing about hard things, as Ben Horowitz would say. This is all about the stoic in all of us. So let's tune in now to Simon Sinek giving us a very powerful thought around intensity versus consistency.
Great culture, no matter where we are, no matter how big the organization, is not about intensity, it's about consistency. You can't get into shape by going to the gym for 9 hours. It won't work. But if you work out every single day for 20 minutes, you will absolutely get into shape, right? Intensity is like going to the dentist. It's fixed in time. We know exactly what date we're going. We know how long we're going to be there. And we know that when we come out, our teeth will feel smooth and look pearly. But if that's all we do, all our teeth will fall out. In other words, intensity is not enough. So we're also supposed to brush our teeth twice a day for 2 minutes in the morning and 2 minutes in the evening. What does brushing your teeth do for 2 minutes? Nothing. It does absolutely nothing unless you do it every single day. Can you leave out a day? Sure. How many days can you leave out? I don't really know. How many times do you have to brush your teeth before it works? I don't know that either. And this is why companies don't do it. Because we like intensity. We like things that are fixed in time and easily measured. We want to make leaders. What do? We have a company offsite. We invite a whole bunch of speakers. Everybody gives the event an 8.5. Leaders. No. No. We like intensity. How do we fix broken companies? Reorg. New management. Aha. We can see the results. Layoffs. We love it. Look at the savings. Yeah, in the short term. We love intensity for the simple reason that it's easy to measure and we can calculate the day, we can calculate the time, highly predictable. But it's consistency that is the human part. You know, what does it take to fall in love? Buy her flowers, remember her birthday. Important, but if that's all you do, it won't work. It's the little things. Like when you wake up in the morning, you say good morning to her before you check your phone. When you get up to get yourself a drink, you bring one back without asking if they even wanted one. Any one of those things does nothing. It's the accumulation of all of those things done over the course of time repeatedly that one day someone will wake up and go, oh my God, I love you. It's the exact same thing in a company, which is we do these things repeatedly, which is instead of waiting for Charlie to show up at the meeting who's running a few minutes late and we're all just on our phones waiting for Charlie. He's just running. Is he here? Just a few more minutes? Okay. Oh, Charlie's here. Good. Let's start the meeting. Instead, we should have no phones in conference rooms ever. Because you know what happens? We sit in the room and we talk. We go, I heard your mum's in the hospital. Oh, yeah, thanks. No, she's much better. Thanks for asking. Yeah. And that's called building relationships. What does it do? Nothing. It does nothing. But if you do it on a regular basis over the course of time, what ends up happening is you discover that you trust your colleagues, that you love your boss, that you believe to the core of your being that if something is wrong, that they will be there for you. And what starts to happen is you start to be willing to be vulnerable. Vulnerable doesn't mean walking around crying. That's not what it means. What vulnerable means is I'm willing to raise my hand and say, I made a mistake. I'm not qualified for the job that you gave me. I don't know what I'm doing. Without any fear that by revealing those things will you be humiliated or fired. And here's the joke. It's good for business.
Yeah, it's actually the smallest things, but done consistently over time that makes the big difference.
I know. And Chad, it just takes me to the metaphors of going to the gym, eating healthy, good sleep routine.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, because I think, we'll get burnt out otherwise. And it's fascinating to me too, like how similar, an organization or a company is to us humans. We kind of sometimes think of corporations as these kind of cold, personality-less entities at times, but like in the same way that it's very hard for humans to do the consistent things, like, brush our teeth, as Simon says, it's also very hard for the corporations to do the same. And he talks about, I've been at offsites and I've been working with companies that have gone through or are going through reorganizations. And, the leadership does think that will be the silver bullet, when if you actually just talk to the individuals, they're like, yeah, my boss doesn't listen to me. It's like, oh, if the boss just listened to the person once a week, even, or said, right, good job, right, once a week.
Oh, don't even get me started. Feedback is like crucial to people thriving and engaging in a corporation.
Yeah, but how many times have we been doing work and never once been recognized, looked in the eye, and said, Mike, thank you for the work that you did. This is the impact that it had.
Yeah.
Like, it should not be the exception to the rule.
That's right. But, people are so preoccupied with the things that they're battling, they forget others need some consistent, being the key word here, feedback. I'm interested, Chad, like if you were to reflect on how you keep consistent on the things that matter, do you have any tips or suggestions on how to keep these positive, consistent habits, regardless of work or at home? How do you kind of keep your consistency? How do you strive to keep the good stuff happening?
I'm trying to think if I want to go like the super tactical or not. I have I don't even know what the name of the app is, but I have an app on my phone where all you can do is create a check mark on a day or not. And so for me, it's did I get my physical activity today or not? And I calculate that in a lot of different ways. Sometimes I bike, sometimes I go to the gym, sometimes I do a lot of walking. But then I just have the whole 30-day view of the calendar, and I can say, oh, it's mostly full, or it's totally full, like great, or there's long stretches of emptiness, and then I'm like, ooh, I've kind of fallen behind. But if you just like search on Google like for "don't break the chain," you'll probably come across a story about how Jerry Seinfeld talks about, writing one joke every day, regardless of whether it was good or not, and how he put a big red mark on his calendar when he did. And that was really what kind of kept him going, as he was struggling in the small time, comedy sellers. But I think, it just as simple of, did I do it today or didn't I do it today, is how I do a lot of that tracking.
Yeah. I'm exactly the same. I have this crazy, this is going to show you how a bit intense I can be about productivity. I actually set as a recurring daily task, let me count here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 things are daily recurring tasks, which are my essential habits that I have to do consistently every day. So everything from this: sleep well, work out, deliver one high value deliverable per day. Like one thing I deliver has to be a big chunk. Burn 3,000 kJs in active energy. Eat well, write my goals, listen to a podcast, etc., etc., etc. I actually basically task the things I do every day, and I just have to mark them as either done or not done. And it is such a great way of just forcing myself to have these consistent habits. And I would say like two of those that really stand out is I have a task every day to write my journal and to work out. And I can't tell you, those two things keep me so on track with work. Just like the energy I get from working out and the clarity of mind I get from journaling, essential tips to consistency.
Yeah, well, I will find the name of the app, and we can put that in the show notes for everyone. Simon does a great job of kind of contrasting two very different ideas and telling stories around them. And so I just want to jump into this next clip where he's talking about being nervous versus being excited.
I was also watching the Olympics, and this is what I realized this when I was watching the London Olympics, so a couple Olympics ago. And I was annoyed by how all the journalists asked all the athletes the same stupid question. Literally, everyone. were you nervous? Or are you nervous? Whether it was before or after the event. Every single time. And every single time, all the athletes gave the exact same answer. No, I was excited. No, I'm excited. Every single time. These elite athletes had learned to interpret body stimulus. What are the signs of nervousness? Your heart races, you visualize the future, your hands get clammy. What are the stimulus for excitement? Your heart races, you visualize the future, your hands get clammy. They had learned to interpret what their body was telling them, not as nerves, but as excitement. And the reason the journalists said, were you nervous, is because they would be nervous. Athletes would never say that to each other. They say, that was exciting. So I tried it. I did a little test on myself, right? I'm on a plane. We start hitting some really bad turbulence. I go, and then I say to myself, literally out loud, this is exciting. And I was fine. And I was fine. So I do it a lot now. When I find myself getting nervous, I say to myself, this is so exciting, and I'll explain the reason to myself why. So, like an actor, you don't get nervous when you go on stage anymore, but occasionally you do. So I get to go on stage a lot, and I don't really get nervous much anymore, but I was going to present to 3,000 chiefs of police right in the middle of all this police brutality hullabaloo. And I got really nervous because the stakes were really high, you know? And I was literally getting nervous backstage. And I said to myself, this is so exciting. I have an opportunity to talk to a group of people who can actually affect change in this country. This is really exciting. Now, I could have said the same thing. I'm so nervous. I'm about to talk to people who can... But the interpretation was excitement. Just change the narrative. It works brilliantly well.
So the big question I have for you, Chad, is we all face this nervous versus excited dilemma. Do you have any... How do you make that transition? Have you tried to make that transition? Because it's so true, isn't it? It's so easy to shift between these two states. How do you try and be excited and rather than nervous and sweaty and
Well, I actually have a word for this, like nervous-sighted or nervous excitement. I've conflated the ideas before. I think because he's so right. It's though they're kind of on other sides of like the edge of the blade, and you can kind of fall one way or the other. Where I geek out in this is nervousness and excitement are self-narratives, and it not to get all Tony Robbins on you, but like it is just a mindset shift to change one into the other. And I don't want to gloss over, I think the most powerful part of Simon's hack here is he said it out loud. The physical embodiment of saying, oh, this is exciting. That is how you like flip the switch from nervousness to excitement. So like someone like Tony Robbins, who may have in his prior life gotten very nervous before going out in front of a group of 400 people to change their lives. He's jumping on a trampoline behind the stage, like to embody that excitement, like to get going and get excited.
Rev the engines.
Yeah. So I think that, just that simple reframe is really powerful. And it's so interesting to me too, because again, as a storyteller, like, there's some nuance there, but you just have to begin to tell yourself a different story, and it can be very, very different experiences.
Yeah, I would just add one thing on that, which is the way I shift from being nervous to excited. A thing that you can do other than just changing your mental frame is be prepared. Because when you give a talk, if you spent time writing it out, rehearsing it, it's so much easier to embody excitement and to know that you've got something really good, really polished to offer the audience. And I would say the metaphor is, again, the same with sport. We all know when we're walking out on a game and we're not prepared, you feel it, and that's why you're nervous. But if you're fit, strong, got a good team plan, you've got each other's backs, that's when you know, hey guys, I'm pumped. I'm excited. I want to do this. And so I think preparation would be a big tip to give our listeners here. This is how you can make that shift from nervous to excited. And I think that all of this kind of takes place in a sort of in a bigger field. I think getting excited is easier to do when you love what you do. And to wrap up this whole first half of the show, I think it's really important for us to remember that you've got to go back to your why and make sure that whatever you're doing really supports that, because then, as we've talked about, you can have the courage, you can bring the consistency to the game, but you can also make this shift from nervous to excited. So I think to kind of frame this whole life hacking advice that Simon has for us, I think that's really the flow that we want our listeners to get into. So before we jump into our book review and we go over into the leadership world, I think it's really important that the courage, consistency, and excitement all starts with knowing why you're on the planet, what gets you up, what drives everything you do, how can you bring it all back to one thing. So I feel like Simon has given us a lot to chew on there. I mean, you know, you have placed that challenge to me, and it's so funny. Even though I think about it a lot, when you're like, "Oh, Michael, what you doing?" You're like, "Whew," you know, it's a big meal to digest, isn't it, Chad?
Yeah, and it's ever changing. But yeah, let's hear what Simon has to say on the subject.
Passion is not an actionable word. It's correct, that those who do the things that they're passionate about do better, but it's not helpful advice. And so the question is, where does passion come from? Passion is a result. Passion is an energy. Passion is the feeling you have when you're engaged in something that you love. Passion is the feeling you have that you would probably do this for free, and you can't believe somebody pays you to do it. And I think we mistake that passion is something we do in our private lives, but it shouldn't be done, in our careers, for example. And I'm a firm believer that you are who you are. And anybody who says, I'm different at home than I am at work, in one of those two places, you're lying. And the goal is to make everything you do in home and at work something that you have excitement to do. So how do you find the things that you're excited to do? Well, it's actually easier than you think. What are the things that you love to do? What are the things that you would do for free? How can you recreate that feeling and be paid for it? So what are the things that I do on the weekend, right? I love, I'm very involved in the art world. I love to go to museums and galleries, but I love to go see dance and performances because I want to see how others are interpreting the world. So that inspires me. New ideas, new thoughts, new ways of looking at the world are things that interest me privately, and I seek it out and pay money for it, right? So does that mean I have to have a career in the arts? No, it means I have to have a career where new ideas are explored, where people are experimenting and trying things out, and I have to explore new ideas and try things out, and I'm just as excited to go to work every day as I am to, go do something on a Saturday night. And so the idea of finding your passion is ironically simple because you should be doing stuff that you enjoy sometimes. What is the stuff that you enjoy? And then what is the stuff that you love? Who are the people that you love, and what do they all have in common?
What I would offer to our audience here is the greatest litmus test of finding your passion is, would you go to your office and do your work for free? I think, Chad, that is such a great challenge. And you don't have to say, yes, of course. Maybe you go, some bits. And the great question from that was, well, which bits and how can you do more of them? But I love this idea. There's no difference between work you, home you. It's just you, and you should be doing the stuff you love. And I cannot tell you, this has been such a big thing in my quest in life. And since I read his book, is to do what I love and to try and get my work as close to being things that I would do for free because they bring me so much joy, satisfaction. Sure, they can be hard. I don't always like it day to day, but boy, do I love the mission. Chad, how have you got to doing your passion? You made a huge switch in your time at college. I mean, how do you follow your passion? How do you keep on track with that?
Well, it's interesting because I was a super nerd in my younger years, very into the, math.
Hang on. You just built your own PC. You're trying to tell me that's changed?
Well, yeah, that's true. I guess I still am, but yeah, no, I was very into math and science, STEM, although it wasn't called that back when I was in school. And I still think that I could find some real interest and passion in that work. I just don't think maybe I'm quite smart enough to do it anymore, at least in that way. But I think, yeah, it was one class, it was one teacher, and that really transformed, I think, like my understanding of what my possible futures could be. I was like, oh, that's what I want to do. Like, I want to tell stories. I want to connect with people and help them share their stories. And I'm giving a little bit of my why away here.
I feel it.
Actually, I'll just go ahead and state it. I've recently written it down, but I am on a mission to accelerate the pace of innovation by sharing stories from the frontier of work and culture.
From the frontier, Chad Owen. Boy, that is expansive. And tell me, how many times did you have to think and write that through? Like, what did it take to get there?
Oh, it's still changing. It might change this afternoon. But no, it was a really great exercise for me to go through, and preparing for this show kind of re-inspired me to revisit it. You'll notice that innovation, that keyword is in the title. Like, you and I are showing up in podcasting. We're not getting paid. Like, I see this podcast as directly connected to my why, right? To accelerate the pace of innovation by sharing stories. Like, that's what we're doing right now.
Yeah, I
that's
totally
what I'm doing
get
with my
you.
clients. Yeah,
Yep.
It's fun for me to see, like, my why is both kind of from within me, but it's also like I'm looking at what I have done and have been doing, and also crafting my why around the best parts of what I'm doing. And so this is maybe kind of how, like, I just want to call it out, Mike. You and I are so fortunate to be in the positions that we are, to work in our passions. But many people aren't, or are struggling to figure out how to do it. And I would just, in reflecting on how I've kind of come into stating this why, like, I would just advise people to look at the best parts of their work experience and their personal experience, and like make a list. It's like, oh, this is where I really come alive, and this is where I'm really activated and really impassioned. And then, begin to craft your why statement around that, and then just do more of it, as best as you can. And oftentimes, you have that opportunity in your workplace. Sometimes you have to try to actively transform your work, and then others you have to leave that work behind and move on. But yeah, that was that's been my experience in crafting my own why.
And I think just having the fortitude to really go and ask why, and that almost will set you on the course. I mean, Chad, I would propose that if any of our listeners go about this exercise of asking what they do, how they do, why they do it, and reflect on it just a little bit, it's almost a self-fulfilling prophecy. I feel like you once you go, oh my gosh, yes, then you just get on the freight train. You just get going, don't you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And I think that everyone should start with why. But like you, Mike, it's certainly in the top of my reading list, but I can wholeheartedly recommend it to everyone. My mom, my brother, my like everyone, the person that sits next to me in the co-working space, strangers on the subway. I think because he gives us a really easy to understand and simple framework to begin to discover our why. I won't say it's easy, but the framework is simple. You still got to sit down and do the work. But yeah, I think it is a wholehearted recommendation from me, and you too. I believe.
Yeah, I mean, we're totally just digging deep on our official Chad Owen book review, and I'm telling you, Start With Why is, I mean, you just can't go wrong reading this thing. Just to give you an idea, so I must have read this, 5-7 years ago. Today, I was with a client. It's a large media company here in Australia, and we're working on 7 really quite radical products. And with all of the teams that are building and working on these businesses and products, much of the time I was like, that problem sounds good, but let's ask why this business, why this product, it really exists, and how can we make the mission bigger? So I was like totally unintentional, but just Simon Sinek was just pouring out of me. And that's how powerful the book is. I mean, I've read a ton of books since then, all to do with building product, all about innovation, and I'm still going back. It is such a simple framework. I mean, it is impossible to forget, and it can really light a big fire. So I think Start With Why by Simon Sinek, top 10. And not far off it is Leaders Eat Last, Why Some Teams Pull Together and Others Don't. And this one, you told your little vignette from the book. The one thing that has stuck in my mind, and this was, I believe it was, correct me if I'm wrong, Chad, he tells the story of the Marines and how they do breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Was it the Marines? Yeah?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. At the chow.
Yeah. So check this out. So he tells the story of, this is like kind of this elite army force. It's the US Marines. But when they get to the mess hall for lunch, it's actually the young cadets that actually get to eat first, and the most senior Marines eat last. And I'm like, oh, that doesn't sound like how the army would work. And he goes on to explain, obviously, that the Marines are in like the front line of the most intense, most mission critical jobs. And the essence to everything sticking together as a team is that the youngest, the least experienced Marines know that they have the protection, the coverage from the elder statesmen in the Marines.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the core practice they do to enforce that every time they eat, they know someone's got their back. And I was just like, oh, gosh. Because so much of corporate life is hierarchical and the boss has the corner office and the best car spot. No. It shouldn't be like that at all. And it is such a powerful reminder that we can look around us and find inspiration for how leadership really looks and feels. So that's why I loved Leaders Eat Last. Both books, Chad, recommended reading from the Moonshots podcast.
Yeah, and they're short reads.
Yeah.
Relative to some of the other books that have been written by people we've profiled on the podcast. And he's just a great storyteller. It's not the dry, boring case studies that you might get in some other business books.
Yes.
They're very memorable and in great real world applications and examples of what he's talking about. And the clips in this last half of the show are, I think, the culmination and combination of both books and how that's formulated Simon's views and advice on leadership. And so first, we can just get kind of an overview from him on how and why it's important to lead in a new way.
One of the great things that is lacking in most of our companies is that they are not teaching us how to lead. And leadership is a skill like any other. It is a practicable, learnable skill. And it is something that you work on. It's like a muscle. If you practice it all the days, you will get good at it and you will become a strong leader. If you stop practicing, you will become a weak leader. Like parenting, everyone has the capacity to be a parent. Doesn't mean everybody wants to be a parent, and doesn't mean everybody should be a parent. Leadership is the same. We all have the capacity to be a leader. Doesn't mean everybody should be a leader, and it doesn't mean everybody wants to be a leader. And the reason is because it comes at great personal sacrifice. Remember, you're not in charge, you're responsible for those in your charge. That means things like when everything goes right, you have to give away all the credit. And when everything goes wrong, you have to take all the responsibility. That sucks, right? It's things like staying late to show somebody what to do. It's things like when something does actually break, when something goes wrong, instead of yelling and screaming and taking over, you say, try again. When the overwhelming pressures are not on them, the overwhelming pressures are on us. At the end of the day, great leaders are not responsible for the job. They're responsible for the people who are responsible for the job.
So, Chad, for me, the line in that is just punching me in the face is that when we think about leadership, you are not in charge. You have to care for the people in your charge, and putting them before yourself. It's almost contradictory to the modern picture of any sort of leader and any sort of political business sport. Like, so much it's about the hero leader, isn't it? And very little of it is about the servant leader, those that put others before themselves. I love this idea of that you're not in charge. You have to take care of the people in your charge.
Yeah, I think his view of leadership is so antithetical that I think a lot of people read and listen to him and just outright dismiss him.
You really think that they dismiss him because he's so good at telling a story?
His view is just like so antithetical to how they see themselves. Like, I see this rejection of this idea of the servant leader so much. I mean, I'm right there with you, Mike, but I think we still have a long ways to go to fully incorporate it. And I think maybe one thing that I'm not doing very well right now is that thing around giving away the credit and taking the full responsibility.
Yeah.
And I think being better at consistently, giving the feedback and the praise and taking more full ownership. I think that's something that everyone in every organization can do, and I think it will lead to better teams.
He really does. You're really onto something there. I mean, he really points out this key moment, and it's where you feel the full weight of leadership, where he's like, so when everything's going really, really well, you can't take any of the credit. And when things are going really, really bad, you got to take all the fall. And then you're like, ugh, that is so what it's about. And it's so hard to do because it's just like tough stuff.
Yeah. Well, and actually, here's an interesting example. So maybe I was a little too hard on myself. I was producing a project for an overseas client, and they needed 4 different shoots across 2 days in 4 locations in North and South California.
Oof, that already sounds tough, to be honest, Jen. You just tell me, I'm like, better you than me.
Well, so, I made it happen, and the client was, but I wasn't on the ground for all of it. I can't be in 2 places at once. So, we uploaded all the footage and clips, and the client was reviewing it. And I got this great short email from the client of like, this is nothing short of spectacular. All of our previous, companies that we worked with in the US, like, haven't delivered the same results. And that made me feel good. And then I could have just simply responded and been like, yeah, of course, this is what I do. But then I was like, oh, you know what? Actually, this would be best if I sent it to my producers and shooters that were like there on the ground and my collaborators. I was like, oh, okay. So then I just copied and pasted what the client wrote and just sent it to my team and was like, thanks everyone. The client's thrilled. It doesn't sound like a whole lot, but they all responded and said, thanks. Like, we're so glad that it turned out that way.
That's okay. A great story.
That's what Simon's talking about.
Yeah, there you go, Simon.
This happened yesterday. It literally happened yesterday.
Oh, wow, man. That's super. That's really super. Yeah, just get the 2 books, read them. There's so much in this. And look, building on this idea of, putting others before yourself is really this path to leadership. The other thing that Simon Sinek brings to us really well is that in that day-to-day action, there's a lot of these sort of interactions between people, And what we sometimes forget is that these are all chances to build trust between two people in a relationship. And he's got some great thinking on that. So let's listen to Simon Sinek talking about how to establish trust when you're building a relationship.
Trust is the result of something. You can't tell people, trust me. Trust cannot be formed overnight, just as you can't go on one date and decide if you want to marry someone. I mean, it doesn't, you might have lust, but there's no real trust. The best definition of love I ever heard is that you can give someone the power to destroy you and trust that they won't use it. And that's kind of what trust is. It's this deep love. And it comes over time, and it comes from taking lots of little risks, exposing yourself to more danger, making yourself feel more vulnerable, sharing something personal, putting yourself in a position where you have to turn your back and hope somebody won't stab you or steal your stuff. I mean, this is what trust is. It is the result of you making someone feel safe and them making you feel safe. And it's that dance, and that's what it can't be one-sided, And it's like dating. It's like getting to know someone. It's like making friends. It does not happen overnight. And it's a dance of give and take, give and take, give and take, give and take. And when you feel that person will make you feel safe, trust will emerge. It's not an app. It's not a switch. It's not something you turn on. It's something that evolves. You start to feel it. And then one morning you wake up and you're like, oh my God, I totally trust that person. You're not sure exactly what happened to get you there, but you found yourself there.
Yeah, I think this connects a lot to me to his idea of consistency.
Yeah.
And that it's not a grand gesture that's going to get someone to trust you. It's those little things every day that's going to build that trust between you and the other person.
And I think I think about how we work together. I have absolute trust that all the production, all the polish on our final product will be done, because some 40 episodes in, over a year of recording together, almost 20,000 listens, I just know you're going to get it done. I can totally trust it. And that's what comes from that consistency idea. But I guess where we should really point this towards is it only comes over time through these small moments. And what we have to be aware of is each moment is an opportunity to either build or lose trust. And my experience has been it's slow and hard to build trust, but it's fast and easy to lose trust.
Yeah. Yeah. In the same way that I always wake up with clips in my inbox to listen to in preparation for the show. Yeah. That's kind of a scary idea though, Mike, like that trust takes a long time, but it can be broken really easy. I don't know, that idea is just it's kind of scary to me.
Well, it is. And I think that, what you see is, you think about great sports teams or great bands, then they never come out of nowhere. There's all this hard work. And we've talked a lot about there's no such thing as an overnight success. There's always the backstory. And when there's more than one person involved, they've played together so much on the stage as a band, on the court as a basketball team. It doesn't matter. The familiarity is there, but I'll go back to the courage. It's when you just know the other guy is going to carry for you. You just know the other guy is going to be there. And you look at a sports team that's on fire, the quarterback, he can just throw the pass and knows the guy will get there. Or in defense, he knows that I don't have to worry about the guy next to me doing his job. I know he's going to do it. In fact, I know he's probably got my back too. That to me is like the essence of trust, and it's just damn hard work. But what comes of that is I think there's the permission, at least the starting point, for you to become a leader and for people around you to look to you. And that's why I think trust is so essential, don't you, Chad?
Yeah. It's the showing up every day and showing others that you will show up for them and be there for them, or have their back. Yeah. It's very interesting how all of these ideas are very interrelated, that that it's like the work of a leader is actually a trust building task or project.
And there's and Simon speaks a lot about the difference between authority, right, versus leadership. And actually, this next clip goes right to the heart of this. He's got this really powerful thought. So let's have a listen to Simon Sinek talking about managing around you by turning all the people around you from followers into leaders themselves.
I'm learning to manage teams by allowing the teams to do more themselves. There's a brilliant leader by the name of David Marquet who wrote a book called Turn the Ship Around. And he had an experience as a submarine captain on the USS Santa Fe where he realized that as much as he knew about submarining, he'd been a submariner his whole career, that put on this new submarine, he learned the hard way that he actually didn't know how the submarine worked. He made an order that nobody knew how to do it because that didn't exist on that sub. And so he realized he had no choice but to trust his people. And he went through this transformation as a leader of telling everybody what to do to allowing people to tell him what should be done. And I've learned a lot from him, and I highly recommend his book. And I've really learned that, which is, at the top of the organization, as David says, the people have all the authority, the leaders have all the authority, but at the bottom they have all the context, right? And so you can't just push all the context up; you have to push the authority down. And so the responsibility of leadership is to train people, make sure that they have the skill set, help build their confidence that they have the confidence to do what needs to be done. Yeah. They have to have competence and confidence. Right. And that's your job. That's the only job of the leader. It's like a parent. Mm-hmm. Make sure they have competence and confidence. Make sure your kids get schooling and make sure that they believe in themselves. And then leave them, And so I've done the same thing. Instead of sort of showing people how I would do it, I want them to learn how it's done, and feel good about themselves. And then just however they do it is how they do it. Yeah. And the result is remarkable. People feel better about coming to work. They feel like they have something to contribute. They feel more valuable as opposed to just being told, this is how I would do it, or I'm going to do it this way, or do it my way. Completely changing my understanding of my job as more like a parent than a manager has had remarkable impact.
This clip really, as we've listened to, I think maybe nine clips so far, there's this idea of like just not being different people, right, when we're at work. And I love how he draws on the military, or the best parts of the military, and when he's trying to learn about leadership and parenting, like how different is the military and parenting. But he's like, look, there's a lot to be learned from both. But I think if I had to boil down a lot of what he's saying is like, don't try to be a different person or different people at work than when you're going through your daily lives. Because I don't go home and be like, well, I'm the authority and I have all the control over like this. Like my wife would not stand for that, nor would my dog. Because let's be real, the dog is the real boss. But
I think we both realize we're at the bottom of the pecking order at home. We've come to acknowledge and accept this reality.
Yeah. But this idea of like inverting the pyramid, so to speak, of leadership is really fascinating to me.
It is because it is contrarian. But there's some underlying authenticity. Just be yourself, put others before yourself, and don't just be consumed with what you do, but think about how and why you do it, and just be a little bit more self-aware and tune into the things around you. And I just love this idea of empowering those around you so that, they can really go into the best version of themselves. And I think that is like such a great management tip. And we've all run into the worst bosses ever, and you can spot the phonies a mile away. And managers that kind of choke the life out of you, the life's too short to be around those. And I think
they're getting you to do things for them.
Right.
That's kind of their whole worldview, instead of them doing things for you so that you can do the things that you are meant to do.
Right. That is like Simon Sinek is violently agreeing with us right here. But we've got one more thought, Chad, and this is the essence of this latter book, Leaders Eat Last. And oh my gosh, have I committed the crime of trying to be the first one to speak in a meeting so many times. Oh, bad Mike. So let's get ready for our last clip, but it's certainly not least. This is Simon Sinek speaking on why you should always be the last to speak.
If you agree with somebody, don't nod yes. If you disagree with somebody, don't nod no. You will be told your whole life that you need to learn to listen. I would say that you need to learn to be the last to speak. I see it in boardrooms every day of the week. Even people who consider themselves good leaders, who may actually be decent leaders, will walk into a room and say, here's the problem, here's what I think, but I'm interested in your opinion, let's go around the room. It's too late. The skill to hold your opinions to yourself until everyone has spoken does two things. One, it gives everybody else the feeling that they have been heard. It gives everyone else the ability to feel that they have contributed. And two, you get the benefit of hearing what everybody else has to think before you render your opinion. The skill is really to keep your opinions to yourself. Simply sit there, take it all in, and the only thing you're allowed to do is ask questions so that you can understand what they mean and why they have the opinion that they have. You must understand from where they are speaking, why they have the opinion they have, not just what they are saying. And at the end, you will get your turn. It sounds easy, it's not. Practice being the last to speak.
Inspiring music aside, a corollary that I will add to this, and this is something that you can start doing today, is you can self-nominate yourself as a bit of a facilitator, or you can ask someone to do this, but just be sure that every person is called. So just start with the person sitting, let's say, to the right of the so-called boss in the meeting, or highest paid person, or hippo, as it's often called. And be sure that every single person, and just go around the room and say, okay, it's your turn, your turn, your turn. And then at the end, you'll get to the boss. And again, I know that sounds kind of juvenile, like something that we did in elementary school, but it ensures that not only are we the leaders or the last to speak, it's also giving everyone a voice, which I think is also really important, a really important takeaway for me from what Simon's saying here.
Yeah. I think what we're learning, to build on what you're saying, I think what we're learning here is don't be selfish to think you should speak first. Hold your tongue, but it's the beautiful notion of just allow others to speak, and you're giving them a gift of empowerment. But oh, by the way, you get to hear all the opinions and then speak. So you get a more informed view. You're more worldly. You have a bigger spectrum on which you can understand a given problem or an opportunity. And whilst it's so simple, it's like, allowing the young cadets to eat first. While all these things can sound maybe very simple, I think in practice what Chad, you and I are calling out is how often these things don't happen. And it's really about Simon Sinek is reminding us of some very powerful behaviors in which we can lead, in which we can live a better life. But this one of speaking last, this one's real big.
And it's so hard to do often.
Mm-hmm. You're just bursting. You're like, let me, I gotta
say it. It also, if you are formulating your thoughts to jump in to speak, you're not listening to what is being said. And there's this really interesting practice for me on this podcast to be sure that I listen to you instead of, thinking of what I'm going to say as a response.
Yeah.
We have the magic of editing where we can kind of, shorten the pauses between, things that you and I are saying. But like often people are really uncomfortable with that silence. But I think, again, so in giving everyone a voice and then also being sure that you're listening, because you're right. It's like, if you don't have that input, you don't have the context, you don't have the information that you need to be able to make the decisions that you need to do. If you just jump right in, you've already kind of poisoned the water, so to speak. And then everyone's just going to go along with what you're saying and not contribute their own ideas.
Yeah. And perhaps you might even argue those that speak the least in general often carry the best ideas because they're watching, they're listening, they're not busy talking. They're observers of the world. My gosh, Simon Sinek. Look, this guy is still pretty young. He's already knocked out some pretty... Oh, man, he gets right up there with the likes of Jim Collins, who wrote Good to Great. He's producing some pretty epic books. And, good news, he's got another one coming. He's finished it. So...
Oh, really?
Yeah. Just when I was doing my research, I stumbled upon this really lovely thing where he posted, he had his nephew and niece over at his house and they wanted to see his new book, and he said it's only on the computer, and it's this great shot of him explaining the book to them. Yeah, really, really great stuff. I honestly, Tim Ferriss, 4-Hour Workweek, Jim Collins, Good to Great, Innovator's Dilemma from Clay. A lot of that stuff fuels me every day.
Oh, what about the lean startup, Mike?
Oh, funny. You should mention that, Chad. Oh, do you think we should maybe do a show on that Eric fella?
Huh. Maybe episode 42, perhaps?
Funny you should mention that. Yes. The lean startup, Eric Ries. And wow, is that one going to be a treat? I mean, everywhere you go in the business world, it's agile this and lean that. I even saw this thing, Chad, like someone with some lean, remember Sigma 6, right?
Yeah.
That old GE management thing. Yeah, now there's like agile Sigma 6 ninjas and stuff running around big companies. I'm like, I can't keep up with all of this stuff. But there's a reason people are into lean, and it's a rather we were doing a lot of lean stuff today here in Sydney, and my gosh, it's so powerful. It really, really is. So we've got like the next show is all about the lean startup. How many companies have you met, Chad, in the last 5 or 6 years who are all practicing, celebrating, and drinking the Kool-Aid on lean startup?
The funniest thing is that my first paying client when I first moved to New York City was called Lean Startup Machine. I'm not even joking.
Oh my gosh, that is going way back in the time. So how long ago was that? 8 years?
7 years ago? 6, 7 years ago.
Oh my gosh.
But
man.
yeah, I mean, it was right around the time the book came out. And yeah, I was working for a company called Lean Startup Machine. So it's funny because it's partially what kind of got me on this whole innovation train.
There you go.
Was starting to work with companies that were very in tune with what Eric was, his teachings and methodologies.
Yeah.
But yeah, practically every other client and company, if they're not trying to practice and implement it, they at least know of it, are curious about it.
Exactly. So what a fitting way to finish in our next show, our author series. We've had Drucker, Christensen, now Sinek, and to come Eric Ries and Lean Startup. And you want to give a little tease to what might come after? I think we're going to have a special edition show, Chad.
Yeah, we want to bring back some guests on the show. We have loved having the likes of Lauren and Gary and Brennan and I think we're going to go back and ask Gary to be on the show and do a bit of like a history of innovation.
Right.
We've got kind of some other more thematic shows, maybe not individually focused shows. But if you, the listener, have any ideas for either people or companies that you would like us to profile, please get in touch with us. You can find everything at moonshots.io, or you can email us directly at hello@moonshots.io. We love hearing from all of you from all across the globe. Mike and I were just taking a look at some of our statistics.
Yes, come on.
Before we hopped on recording.
There was some crazy stats. I mean, we should say, hey, thanks to all the listeners. We're almost hitting 20,000 plays from all four corners of the planet. It's ridiculous.
Every continent. We've got listeners in Singapore, Nigeria, Australia,
Canada,
Brooklyn, Chicago,
India, and Lady Gaga is taking the crown for the most popular show. She is on a streak, totally crushing it. Also, really, really interesting to see all the different apps people are using. Stitcher, Overcast, Apple, of course, taking first position there. And just the listens are booming at the moment. You know, Angela Arendt's could give the Gaga a bit of a challenge for most popular show. Very interesting, isn't it?
Mm. Yeah, and after we bring Gary back on the show, we're going to take a turn to the investing world, hear from the likes of Charlie Munger, Warren Buffett, Paul Graham, Peter Thiel, and I just finished a really good book about Peter Thiel and Gawker. And that whole takedown is called Conspiracy by Ryan Holiday. So that's still a couple months out, but I'm really excited to dive in and do that series as well.
Yeah, sorry, a real passion series after that. We should tease that will be the Architect series, the Great Architects. So lots,
yeah, and that'll take us through episode 50.
Holy smoke, man. Episode 50. And, you know, the funny thing is we just keep coming up with new amazing people to guest on the show, entrepreneurs and innovators to study and learn from. It's been a real joy. And I tell you what, we have learned a lot today from Simon Sinek. So as you go about your day in Brooklyn, Chad, is there any Simon Sinek isms that you'll take with you? Is there one that you think you might focus on?
I like this idea of listening and, just letting everyone know that I've got their back.
There you go. That is...
Oh, Mike, I can't let you go. We haven't heard your why.
Oh, okay. Well, so caveat here is mine is not...
You almost snuck out of it.
It's not as polished as yours, so I'm feeling very inadequate about that. But let's here it is.
Oh, it's always a work in progress.
So, work-wise, you know, what I do is I think I help people create brave new products. So helping people part is a big area of focus, and then the brave new products.
I love it.
The how here, and this has been a pretty recent breakthrough for me, is I want to be very much with my team, with my clients, and with the end users of these products. I really want to be sort of like this helper, this mentor, this advocate, this sort of coach to them. So it's a big shift for me, because I would say the trap I really fell into in my early part of my career was trying to be the superstar, and I've shifted into trying to make others the star, and I'm more behind the scenes. So that's how I do it, sort of that coach archetype. And the reason that I do all of that I would say, so the idea of empowering people, all of those people in that sort of, all those constituents, to do great things, like to help people really do brave new products that really make a difference, is really, it's such a rewarding journey for me. And the beauty of it is, because I'm helping them so much, it's really rewarding for them. So the quid pro quo, the sort of you get what you give, is so big, because it's brave new software in the world to do amazing things. And just being on that journey with them is just so deeply satisfying for me. And they seem to think it's okay too. So that's why I do it all.
Thank you for sharing.
Bit rough. I need to copyright it a bit.
No, you stated it right up front. Like, you want to help others bring brave new products or create brave new products. Yeah. We can go back to the tape. You can just transcribe it. But yeah, you said it right up front.
There we go. There you have
it. You've got my why and Mike's why. So now it's time to find your why.
Yep.
Don't forget to check out Start With Why and Leaders Eat Last. Both really great books.
Yeah. We'll have links to them in the show notes and lots of great Simon Sinek related content. So go out, make that future happen today in Brooklyn, Chad. I, on the other hand, will close my laptop, leave the studio, and head straight home to collapse on the bed after a rather epic day. But Simon Sinek has given me the zest to make it home. All is good in the world. I want to thank you, Chad, for everything that you shared with us today on the show. Enjoy your Brooklyn morning and what's to come. And I will wish you farewell from Sydney, Australia. Thank you to all our listeners. That is a wrap of the Moonshots Podcast.